Hello, everyone. I'm Sandra Bargman, and welcome back to The Edge of Everyday, now streaming on all your favorite podcast platforms and at MaximizeU.life. Are you a change maker? Do you walk between worlds, between cultures, between systems? If you answered yes to any of these questions, The Edge of Everyday is the place for you. In a nutshell, this podcast is about pushing boundaries and exploring rough edges. Through conversations and shared stories with friends and colleagues, it's my hope that we can begin to understand our edges. And what I mean by edges is those places where we are fearful, those places where we are resistant to change, those places where paradox and contradicting identities live in our beliefs and in our understandings, both individually and collectively. We live in edgy, challenging times. We cannot keep looking away from the ugly, from the difficult, and silence is no longer an option. Life isn't black or white, it's both, and I want to talk about that. I want to face the tension of paradox, and I want to engage in the hard conversations. I want to explore the rough edges between our light-filled brilliance and our dark, shadowy corners. Because the more we recognize our own edges and get real about them, the more we can help others to do the same. And that, I fully believe, can help to change the world. So, thanks again for tuning in. Today, we are live in the Hive with Betsy Gaines Quammen, historian and award-winning author of American Zion and True West, and Tasha Adams, the ex-wife of Oath Keepers founder Stewart Rhodes. Betsy has previously been a guest on the Edge of Everyday podcast in June of 2022. And in that episode, we talked about both of her powerful and relevant books and the significant need to have difficult conversations across polarizing political views and differing cultural perspectives. You can find that episode at TalkRadio.NYC and on my YouTube channel, Sandra Bargman, On the Edge of Everyday. Betsy brings wisdom, sharp wit, engaging storytelling, and deep listening to her important work. And in these incredibly turbulent times under a clearly authoritarian administration, I knew I needed to have her on the show again. When I reached out, Betsy suggested that I also ask her good friend, Tasha Adams, to join us. Tasha's ex-husband, Stewart Rhodes, the founder of the right-wing militia, the Oath Keepers, had just been released from jail, having had his sentence of 18 years for seditious conspiracy for his role in the January 6th insurrection commuted. Tasha's story is deeply moving. A life lived under the thumb of an abusive, manipulative man, and then finding the courage to plan an escape for herself and her 6 children. I could only imagine how she must be feeling upon hearing the news of his release. Democracy requires collaboration. It thrives on diversity and inclusivity. Militias thrive on control, whether that control is of land, populations, or individuals. Oath Keepers, founded in 2009, is an anti-government, right-wing political organization committed to supporting and defending their interpretation of the U.S. Constitution, founded on the belief that the federal government is part of an evil conspiracy intent on stripping Americans of their natural rights and freedoms. Whose rights and whose freedoms? 47 and his administration speaks to the anti-government and militia movement, which is the toxic male movement. Over 40 million Americans voted for Trump in this last election. Did they realize they were voting for toxic masculinity? Probably not. Did they care? Probably not. But they will care when they personally experience gun violence, male aggression, domestic violence, and male mental health problems. The intersection of the Wild West myth, Zionism, colonization, religious fundamentalism, land abuse, capitalism, and the militia movement is patriarchal toxicity. What is toxic masculinity? How do we recognize it? How do we name it? Most importantly, how do we address it? I know the stories and voices of my two guests today will inspire you to explore those questions as much as they have inspired me. Before I welcome our guests, though, let me share their bios. Tasha Adams is the ex-wife of Oath Keepers founder Stewart Rhodes. She escaped the abusive marriage with her 6 children in 2018 after 2 years of careful planning in order to get everyone out safely. She appeared on dozens of live news broadcasts and podcasts and participated in 2 documentaries. She is currently working on her memoir, however painfully slow the pace. Betsy Gaines Quammen is a historian and writer. She received a PhD from Montana State University, where she studied religion, history, and the philosophy of science. Her dissertation focused on Mormon history and the roots of armed public land conflicts occurring in the United States. She is fascinated at how religious views shape relationships to landscape. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, New York Daily News, and the History News Network. She is the author of American Zion, Clive and Bundy, God and Public Lands in the West, and True West, Myth and Mending on the Far Side of America. Betsy lives in Montana with her husband, writer David Quammen, 3 giant dogs, a sturdy cat, and a lanky rescue python. Welcome, ladies.
Hi, it's good to be here.
It's great to have you both on. Wow, 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 wow. I have been so excited for this conversation and have just gone down so many YouTube rabbit holes and research rabbit holes, and I'm just blown away by both of you. So thank you so, so much for being on the Edge of Everyday podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, so let's dive in. I like to tell my listeners how I know my guests, and they now know that Tasha, that I know you through Betsy, but for those listening, I know Betsy through a mutual friend of ours, Leslie Michaels, and I love to share that because Leslie was a dear, dear friend of mine, and Leslie had Betsy on her show. She had a podcast, and Leslie passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. So I always love to bring Leslie up, and she had a great podcast called Women We Should Know. And Tasha, I'm sure she would have had you on too. But I liked always to plug my friend Leslie Michaels. Okay, so this is a question I love to ask all of my guests because I find it so interesting and revelatory, and it's one that can change. You know, I've had repeat guests on and I've asked them and they've had different answers, and I love that. So I'm going to start with you, Betsy. What identity do you lead with?
Oh my gosh. What identity do I lead with? I guess it depends on the day. I mean, I think of myself as a dog mom and an aunt and a friend and somebody who loves being outside. But I also hope to think of myself also as a truth teller. It's very, very important to me to be honest and to call things as I see them. I just was thinking about this. I just finished my newsletter and I was thinking about Andrea Gibson, who passed away recently, the poet, who absolutely gorgeous, revelatory, brutally honest, and unbelievably loving and compassionate. And they said, and I hope I get this quote right, but the sometimes what you write about isn't hopeful, but in telling the truth, that's where the hope is. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's essentially you can write about things that are really awful and don't feel particularly hopeful, but in being honest, that's where the hope is. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately because we have so many things we're facing, and it's just coming at us nonstop. And we just have to stay in the place where we're going to tell the truth no matter what, even how bleak it is.
Well, yeah.
So that kind of gets to what we were talking about, Sandra, before the show, that right now, I feel like I'm living in two spaces. I'm living in my day-to-day life where I am still going to have joy. So I'm a person who loves joy and will continue to pursue that.
And
But I
that's
also
resistance too, BTW.
we have to have that place of resilience. But then I also really feel that I have the responsibility and obligation to tell the truth, even when it feels dire.
Yeah. I love that. I had a woman on who, her second time on the podcast last week, and she called me a truth teller and she thanked me for that. And I said, yeah, it's not easy to be real. Truth is up for grabs in our world. And it's not easy and it can feel brutal, but there is hope embedded in that. Because if you're willing to be honest, like the edge of every day about the light and the dark and the complexities of each human and where we are contradicting ourselves and living in paradox and the shadows that are coming up to the surface collectively here in the United States. I mean, if you can't be real about that, you cannot carve out some hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. All right, Tasha, what identity do you?
Well, that's certainly been in flux a lot lately. I mean, for decades, well, for instance, when I was young, oh, well, I'm a dancer, I'm going to school, and then I was a wife, and then I was really entrenched in the identity of, oh, well, I'm a homeschooling, breastfeeding, attachment parenting. I was the trad wife, and I bake bread from, you know, brine the wheat, and and when all of that fell away, then I was, and still sort of am, the ex-wife of Stewart Rhodes of Oath Keepers. And you asked for a short bio. Man, I put that off until about 5 minutes ago. Well,
No.
I don't know. I don't know. I feel so in flux. Well, I used to call myself, well, I'm a writer, right? Well, I haven't really written much. So,
But you are
but
writing.
I'm rebuilding. Yeah, I am. I
Yeah.
am actually co-writing a play, a fictionalized version of sort of a wife that leaves behind a whole lot of
Oh
crazy,
my.
and accidentally co-wrote a song. That was
I
fun.
listened to it, and we're going to talk about that at the end. It's in my notes here with Slim Vampire.
And I mean, I think I'm rebuilding. I think my first thought is, I'm kind of maybe a survivor. Maybe I'm just somebody who's
Hmm.
just I'm a rebuilder.
I love
With
that.
that.
How powerful is that? And
Yeah,
open is that?
yeah.
And well, I
I mean, and
loved, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, about a year ago, I moved into a place that was furnished, and I threw out everything I owned. It sounds silly, but things sort of hold they sort of hold this
Energy.
reflection of who you are, and I don't want to know who I was 5 years ago. It doesn't really have any bearing on where I am now, and I just sort of wanted to restart in a this place is lovely, but it's a bit bland. It's my 11-year-old calls it Montana Moose Core decorated, and it's just, everything's brown, and I'm just rebuilding, and I guess that's where I'm at. I did anyways.
Well, as a writer, I checked out a lot of your blogs too on your website,
Oh.
which is thatgirltasha.com, listeners. And in one of them, you used the word reclaim.
Hmm.
And that feels like what you just were saying about rebuilder, that
Yeah, yeah.
you're, and I I love that the identity of being a rebuilder and a reclaimer. And I think that I think there's no woman on the face of the planet that's not walking with a bit of that identity.
Yeah, yeah.
As we, which is the topic, the overarching topic of this discussion is, and what I said to Betsy before you came on, before our conversation, the fall of patriarchy and that the toxic masculinity that's at the heart of that as they kick and scream and hold on to these old traditional ways of being. And yeah, it's up to the women to rebuild, to be the rebuilders. I'm going to adopt that identity, the rebuilder. Yes. So I want to know how you guys met. How did that happen? Oh, look at you. Perfect reaction. For those who are just listening, both of their faces were awash with confusion. It was great.
I remember when we first sat down together. I don't remember how it really came about.
I think I just called you.
Yeah, I think so.
I think I just because I was writing this book. I was doing a section on the Oath Keepers. My first book I wrote about a family in Utah, or excuse me, in Southern Nevada. They're an LDS family in Southern Nevada.
An LDS for our listeners, folks.
Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
So members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
And Stewart had been very, very involved in some of their maneuvering. They were involved in a armed standoff over an issue on public lands. It's a long story, but they were grazing cows on public lands. And for those of you out there, public lands are federally owned lands. In the West, where Tasha and I live, we both live in Montana. We have, I think, 600 million acres of public lands, including national parks, including national forest, including Bureau of Land Management, wilderness areas, some of the most wonderful places that as Americans, we jointly own. I mean, these are our lands, and so the Bundy family were illegally grazing cattle on a piece of Mojave Desert, and they had not been paying grazing fees, and this happened for 2 decades, and it finally came to a head, and there was an armed standoff, and a number of militia from across the country decided that this was going to be their stand, including Stewart Rhodes, and Tasha can weigh in on this at any point. She knows this better than anybody. But in my second book, I was examining the mythologies that informed some of the participants of the standoff. And I think, and we're going to get more into this, but I think Stewart Rhodes in particular really embodies the mythologies that create this toxic masculinity. And so I reached out to Tasha and just said, can we sit down? And I went to Eureka, Montana, which is the most wonderful. I'd been there before. It's in the western part of the state. And we happen to live in a state that's quite big. So driving over to see Tasha was a little bit of a jaunt. And I went over and we sat down to breakfast. And I swear to God, I could have stayed at that breakfast for days. I mean, she's funny, she's resilient, she's unbelievably creative. So she's so fun to talk to, and it was one of these things where you sit down and you're like, oh my God, this is my girlfriend. Like I just this is my
I felt like
path.
we've known each other for years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we just hit it off like crazy. And part of that was we knew we had this background. I mean, she lived it. I've been researching it. So we kind of had this common language and could relate to each other, but also she's an absolute delight. And I think one of the things that really got me, in addition to just finding somebody who's endlessly interesting and unbelievably smart, is that she had not had, I mean, this is actually going to make me kind of tear up. She hadn't had friends because Stewart kept her from being in relationship with other people. And I just couldn't believe it because I'm like, oh my God, if you live next to me, you'd never see the end of me. Like I would be over at your house constantly. And which I hope doesn't sound kind of
Yeah, baby cry.
stalkery, but but I just thought, how can this person who's so magical have been deprived of relationship? And how could people have been deprived of relationship with her? Because she's just a wonderful human. And so that's how we met. I mean, it was like this collision of
Oh, I
joy
love this.
and
It was
sort of
yeah, it was
camaraderie.
amazing. We had a
How,
lot of fun.
I'm sure, how did it feel to share all this with Betsy?
Oh, incredible. I mean, I really, honestly, that's probably the first time I sat down with another woman over coffee and, probably had been decades. And
Wow.
really, and I was in the habit of, if I were to say anything about, I don't like the way this was going, or my husband was controlling, or I was in such a habit of bracing for impact in any social environment at all, even, in the few group settings I'd been in where people would be like, your job as the wife is to, fix all that. And, it was really, um, it was just an amazing thing to have someone say, yeah, you're right, and agree with me. And
And want to know more.
yeah, and it was almost a fairy tale like. I can't believe that I'm, no one's lecturing me on not being a better wife and fixing all that, you know.
Oh my Lord.
I
Well,
mean, I knew logically it wasn't going to go that way, but emotionally, that's how.
well, and that's so much a part of it, is that it's all
Yeah,
emotional because logic is pushed aside. I mean, how did it feel to talk about this myth of the I'm going to go out to the West and be a cowboy and everything that Betsy's researching and knowing all of those toxic male traits? I mean, the lack of socializing that you just
just
shared about.
yeah.
What are some of the other things that
Well, it's just so validating to see that this is a pattern, and
mm,
others are, this is a pattern that these men fall into, and it wasn't this completely, this isolated event where, oh, I think this is really strange. I think he's just trying to control everything. And no, this is something they do. And yeah, and it's a whole culture. I mean, and it's just this idea of just constantly, being in charge of everything, and every little thing is an insult to, anything that doesn't support them is an insult, or it just, it was a little easier for me to see the patterns in some ways because Stewart was this sort of narcissistic personality, not just within the family, but they can't help but do it to other people. And so I would see the same patterns, sometimes even just with employees, but particularly with women. He couldn't get along with them for very long, or even people he worked with would immediately not get along with the secretaries, or would not, because he was constantly playing the game of build up, tear down, sort of psychological games with people to try to break them down.
interesting build up? Right. Well, I went on to your website of, as I've said, and read your blogs. I came across one blog, but that really just absolutely was, I was hit over the head by it. But before I share that, what I had read just prior to reading that particular blog was I had pulled out Betsy's, I have both of her books, but I pulled out American Zion. And there is a quote by Terry Tempest Williams about her book. At the top of it, she says, brilliant and electrifying. Gaines Quammen's voice is bright, engaging, and smart. And I love Terry Tempest Williams. And I remember that she had done a piece, an opinion piece in the New York Times that came out right after the big ugly bill had passed, but the provision that the public lands were not up for sale. That portion had been cut out thankfully. And Terry wrote a complete piece on this. And this is the quote that jumped out to me right before I read your blog. What I knew then, this is a quote from Terry Tempest Williams, what I knew then and feel more deeply now is that open lands inspire open minds. This is the open space of democracy. Then I went to your blog titled Hoarding Narcissism and the Battle of the Walk-in Closet. And one of the titles within the blog was Open Space is for the Taking. Open time is for the taking. And I was like, this is the macro micro of all of it. This is where the intersection of the two of you meet, the macro of the land and the micro of the female human. And it was the open space, the control of the open space. Tell us about that blog, how that sparked, and then Betsy can weigh in on her feelings around, because I know it's not everyone out west believes that the public lands should be, lots of what I would consider conservatives, or maybe men who have plugged into the mythology do want to keep the open lands. Not all of them, I realize that, but I do want Betsy to weigh in. But first, Tasha, how did that realization happen? And I love the challenge that you made with it. This is an amazing metaphor and story.
Well, one of the things I do really like to do in writing is I really do like, or in my story in particular anyway, is sometimes the big things are too big. And it's very hard to tell someone, oh, I live with a psychopath who put a gun to my head, or, they shut down and they can't, no, most people can't identify with that. But a lot of people have lived with a hoarder, or I mean, a lot of people have lived with even just as a roommate. Everyone's known a narcissist. And so sometimes I kind of like to do storytelling through small things that are just really aggravating. And people, why wouldn't you write about the one he left you dying on the floor? Well, I wrote about that too, but this is identifiable, right? And I kind of really enjoy just kind of writing about the little. It's also not as mentally exhausting, and there's that
totally
too, right?
It's so symbolic. But I love how you said, if I can maintain, it was like
it was a war.
Space in your mind.
Yeah,
it
I'm going to
reflected
maintain
so much.
one section of closet, and I'm going to fight for it. And it cost me hell for months, until eventually I lost the battle because he started taking it on the kids, and I give up that space. But it couldn't believe the time and the energy that this person was putting into, what Stewart was putting into, making my life hell over a small section of closet that I wanted to have as a space.
For yourself.
Yeah, and it really was symbolic of, our entire lives. It's also symbolic of the entire mindset, and the same philosophy, reaches out, and it's in every situation. They will battle it out. They feel small inside, they want to feel bigger, and they want to own this territory, whether it's a shelf in the closet or open lands in Nevada. They just want to put their stamp on it, and they need to plant that flag, and this is mine. And no one taught them to share. I think I just
well, but I think you said it, my goodness, that they're just so empty inside. And how I have to have what you have to fill me up.
And maybe not even notice it was there until they see that somebody else has that space or that, and then suddenly it's something they need to have. Just the fact that someone else has it is enough to make them want that.
Unbelievably great writing. I was so deeply moved. Yeah. And Betsy, can you weigh in on the micro and the macro of that, and how it plugs in with the myth, the cowboy Western myth? taking over the open space.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if I can talk about it in a parallel way.
Mm.
Um, because I I'm you know I think that there is and this would be reflected in what Tasha's saying is that once this kind of mentality gets a hold of something, there's no there's no letting go, and it
Mm.
becomes not just an issue of uh, sort of and I'm trying to think of the right words. Like it becomes more of a more than just a battle. It becomes vitriolic and ugly, and petty. And so you don't really have a situation where you have two people on or two constituencies on both sides of an issue, such as public lands, making points that are valid and sort of equal in rational positioning,
In
that you
truth telling.
actually have one side that becomes quite, as I said, belligerent, and cross a line, like bringing out guns, or taking over a wildlife refuge, like
Right.
the Bundys,
Malheur. Yeah.
yeah, Malheur. So it's no longer it throws you off the tactics that they use because it doesn't make sense. It's no longer a understandable confrontation or conflict. It's ratcheted up so much in ways that are disorienting. And
Mm.
so I think what Tasha's talking about is a tactic that you see over and over and over again. And it's something that we're seeing now play out at a national level.
Yeah.
These conflicts, whether it's a shelf in a closet or it's public lands or it's
Or
I
a
mean,
rape case, or
oh,
yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Or detentions over
Throw,
immigration. It's no longer a sort of, as I've said, a rational or understandable or procedural something that we can understand. It becomes dizzying, disorienting, unfair,
violent.
combative, a constant. It's disproportional and very exhausting.
Yeah. And
Um,
that's
and
toxic
so,
masculinity in a
Yeah,
nutshell.
it's
That was a masterclass from these
yeah.
two ladies in toxic masculinity. Yeah, I mean, and the belittling
Mhm.
of women, the the outright belittling, and even in our privately, putting them down publicly, making fun of I can't believe how our politicians speak about female politicians. It's breathtaking that that's
Yeah.
okay. I mean, it just shows up everywhere. This violent takeover, controlling behavior. And yeah, and
It is disingenuous. That's probably the thing that always would bother me the most about trying to come to any kind of understanding with people that think that way, men that think that way. You come in with your okay, here's the points on my side, like Betsy was saying, and here's where I could do better. And you expect the
right,
same, and they just come in, you know, attacking your, greatest phobias or that have
right.
nothing to do with
And
anything.
abusing what you've just
Yeah,
admitted, and
yeah.
abusing that,
And
and
taking
twisting.
advantage. Yep. Yeah. Twisting anything that you said, using literally anything they can against you, and giving no ground, and and not really interested in coming to an honest and genuine place. It's just an all-out war, um,
Mm.
and there's no sense of reason in it. But the disorienting, I think, is that Bessie brought up was just huge. It's a huge, that in itself is a weapon to disorient.
Yeah.
And just what is happening here? I thought we were talking about this, and now I'm defending myself against
That's not
something
a
that's
word.
completely unrelated.
That's not a word I would have ever pulled out, but I am blown away that you guys have both, yeah, the disorientation and the rug pulling of anything factual, of anything that makes sense, any rational, any adult, any emotionally intelligent, spiritually intelligent. All right, I think we've made our point. Thank you.
I have one thing to add if I
Oh,
can.
please do. Of course.
This is something that I've thought a lot about, and Tasha brings it up in the sense that we have to remember that toxic masculinity comes about from deep insecurity, from
Mhm.
emptiness,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I think about, and it's an expression that to me really sort of defines what we're up against, is the tyranny of the weak.
Mm. Yeah,
And it really is, this is tyranny.
absolutely.
Um, and so, as Tasha said, there's no blow
Bottom.
too low. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and prior to our conversation being recorded, the talking about trying to find to live. I do as a interfaith minister and spiritual person, live at the eagle eye view of the understanding, and the Edge of Everyday podcast is based on this concept of wanting to know the light and the dark of a story and watching the collective shadow being brought to the surface so extraordinarily right now that I can live there and get there, but then when I fall back down to being a normal human and see the day to day, minute to minute cruelties, the tyranny on the weak, the celebration of the cruelty. I, I think probably what hurts more than the men is the women that uplift this with the internalized misogyny that they feel, the insecure that they are uplifting this. Breathtaking. All right. So let's move on to, I also read in one of your blog posts, and I loved this, Tasha, that you, and I've heard this from other people, and I've had friends who have been in long-term abusive relationships, and they feel the same way. And there was a sense of, don't ask why did I stay so long? That is just wrong. And I so appreciated that. And I think that anyone that if you spend 3 seconds thinking about it, you can get past the impulse to ask that question. There's so much research out there now. And I think people, would you agree, Tasha, that people have moved a bit beyond, they've come to know that maybe that's not the wisest question. Would you agree with
Um,
that in your experience now?
I mean, I've been asked that. I think I was asked that once on CNN, with someone who should have known better. Why
Wow.
did you stay so long? And I thought, are we really here that people don't know that that's not okay to ask? And I just kind of give the parallel of, do you go into a bank after a bank robbery to interview the hostages and walk in there and say, hey, there was times when you didn't have a gun to your head. Did you make coffee for the bank robber while you were in here? Aren't you an
Yeah,
accomplice?
totally.
You don't
Well,
normally say that.
to not understand the tendrils about the family and about the abuse and the
Yeah.
fear and the psychological to abuse that where you begin to question. But I wanted to highlight that because it was so powerful, and you stated, I want to focus on my story. I want that to be the focus, and I loved that. And is there, in the research that I've done, is there, what are the, and maybe there's no question to ask. Maybe there's none. Maybe there's just deep listening and hearing the story. But if there is a question, what would you suggest in helping people to learn to move past that impulse to go? What would that to ask? Well, why didn't you leave? What question would you suggest?
I mean, for most people who are really trapped, I mean, the answers to that, I'm not really exactly sure what the right question would be, but I know for the most part, the answers start with, the financial abuse. That's a
Yeah,
huge part of it. But it's almost always involving children.
right.
And the biggest thing is when you leave, in most cases, even in my case, up until the end, the abusive spouse, even if there's police reports, they are going to get 50% custody, as Stewart did originally. And they are going to get, you know, unsupervised time with your children. And while you're in the home, as bad as it may be, you are your children's shield 24 hours a day. You are there. And I know you can't always be there when you think, sometimes you fall asleep, sometimes you're in the bathroom, and that's when everything goes wrong. But you can't be there once you're divorced, once you're separated, and the judge gives that time to the ex, and that is always weighing in your mind. And what people don't understand a lot of times is even just all the psychological aside where you think everything's your fault, and that trap feeling and identifying with your abuser and all that other stuff, you still have the legal system to deal with. And I think a lot of people who haven't dealt with a legal system like that, they just don't understand. They think
Yeah.
it's television and, well, that's not right. Or the people, those who just go get a restraining order. Well,
Well,
it's not always that easy. Mine was denied.
wow.
And, it's not that easy. And, in most cases, they're going to get, you know, every other weekend or every weekend or every other week or, and they're going to be alone with kids. Stuart never changed a diaper in his life. And, they wanted me to hand my baby off to him, you know, and that's just a reality. And it becomes a sense where you feel selfish for wanting to get out because now you're putting your kids at even greater risk, it seems. It's not so much in the long term, but certainly in the short term. And you're also not necessarily in a powerful situation when you leave. You're not necessarily in a place where, some women leave and the husband winds up with the kids almost full time because they can't they can't afford a safe space, a proper living arrangement for their kids. And so those are some of the biggest challenges, and of course there's all the psychological sides of it. But really, I think a huge part of it is that that intuitive knowing that you're just giving up, your ability to be a physical shield between the abuser and the children. And that is just so huge. And I feel like it's not something people often bring up when they're talking about why don't you just get out? Because they do want to see the world in this black and white way where there's police reports, there's proof of abuse. In my case, there wasn't police reports, but he admitted to a lot of the abuse and emails that were shown to the court, talked about choking my daughter in the drive. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. Talked about pointing guns at the neighbors. Well, all of that stuff. None of it mattered. And that's just in my case. And there's millions more like it. You know.
I was just going to say, Tasha, you bring up something that I think is so fundamental, and women are trapped in these
Yeah.
relationships, and
Yes.
it's financial, it's kids, it's psychological, and to say, why didn't you just get out is such it's so ignorant
Yes.
And so, my sister is the head of, she's the executive director in Bozeman of Haven, which is the domestic abuse, sort of shelter for men and women, and non-binary people who are in abusive relationships. And they provide so much counseling
Mm.
to address some of the things that you're talking about, financial, legal, protective services. But the other thing that you had to deal with, and I think people don't think about this either, is that when an abusive person, they threaten people, they threaten kids, they threaten their wife or their partner, but they also threaten animals. And
Yeah,
so
that's a
at
huge part of
at
it.
the Haven, Katie has kennels so that women can bring their dogs in because they're afraid that their partner's going to kill their
Yeah.
dogs in retaliation. And you talked about that. And so there's so many things that a person in an abusive relationship has to consider
Mm.
in order to extricate themselves, their children, their animals, their sort of whole identity. I mean,
Right.
it's such a huge process that to
Yes.
ask why didn't you get out sooner is to discount an enormous number of issues.
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, listeners. Learn that. Thank you both so much for both of those answers. Thank you. Wow. So, Tasha, where are you today? How are you?
I,
How are you with,
I, I'm rebuilding. I'm reclaiming.
yeah,
I have a
yeah,
a job that pays $14.50 an hour. I got a raise. Um,
excellent.
but you know what? I really love it. And it's a medical environment, but I get to help people. And
Mm.
you know, I honestly just in January I was Employee of the Month, and it sounds so
Yes,
silly, but I was so excited.
yes,
I got a little
yes.
gift card, and I
I
can't
love it.
believe what a big deal that was to me because I didn't even know that was really a real thing. Um, I thought it was like something on The Office.
Oh my goodness, I love
But
this.
I just really I work with people who are so kind and wonderful,
Mm.
and I have a secret, and I'll tell you, ladies, we have an old chalkboard in our break room, and every few days I take a little part of the chalkboard and I write an inspirational quote, and nobody knows who does it. And that's why, well, I've been caught a few times, but anyone who's caught me has been sworn to secrecy. And and so almost the whole building has caught me, but they don't know. So they all they don't know everyone else has caught me. And it's something I really enjoy, and it's also been a huge just a mental vacation, I have to say.
Mm.
I was there 6 months before anybody ever even knew anything about my situation. Wasn't until, Stewart was making the rounds again in the news from being commuted that the administration took me aside and asked if I was okay and if they could help me with anything.
Mm.
And one person approached me very, very sheepishly and just said, I just put some things together. I think you need a hug. Just kind of left it at that. And it's just been really wonderful, but also been really wonderful not to be the ex-wife of Stewart Rhodes, for 7, 8 hours at a clip. It's just been like a really nice break. And I've also, not really worked on getting my memoir out, but I kind of just needed the space, I think, from it for a
Reclaim.
while. Yeah, and now when you were just kind of reading some stuff from my blog, I don't remember. I might need to read it again because I don't. But you know how it is with writing when you go back and you don't remember writing. Oh, that was pretty good. That's.
Totally.
But I just kind of wanted to be at that place and just have a different person. I kind of want my story to be a little more reflective and not so much in it while I'm
That makes
writing it.
sense.
You know what I mean? And I think I'm finally getting that space. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where I am now.
That makes sense. Well, and my God, I can't even imagine your nervous system.
Yeah.
Allowing
Yeah,
that to
physically. Yeah.
unwind a little bit, so
It's
you
been a
can
lot
just.
of meditation. Me and meditation are best friends now. And I don't even know how I would get through a night without,
Mm,
just meditating and maybe some guided meditation and just taking a lot of deep breaths and a lot of just, okay, just get through the next
wonderful.
5 minutes and then we'll see where we're at. Been a
Yeah,
lot of that. And been really, the one small silver lining is that Stewart was not pardoned, was commuted.
right.
And so he is still a felon. He is kind of behaving because he wants that pardon still and hoping he'll get it. And he has a probation officer for the next 18 months. And he has some restrictions on him. And that's been a little bit of a wiggle room, or,
Yeah,
a little bit of peace, a little space there.
yeah.
So
Well, so there you're just taking your time. There's no, which I love, no deadline on
yeah,
on your writing. That's glorious.
yeah.
Well, we'll hope for some more blogs on your website. And
Yeah.
for our listeners, it's thatgirltasha.com. Betsy, what's on your leading edge right now? What can you share with our listeners?
Okay, so I decided that I didn't want to do anything during my next project that was as scary and draining as extremism, because I've now written two books around that subject. So I'm doing a ghost story book.
Yay.
And
Wow.
I know, so I'm really excited. I'm as a historian, I'm fascinated with both lore around places and why do stories get attached to place, but I also love
Mm.
the idea of ghosts, and I believe in them. I mean,
I do too.
it's
I love that so
so
much.
I do. So I'm talking about a variety of different things. I'm talking about haunted landscapes in a metaphorical sense,
Mm.
and that we have a country that's full of haunted landscapes. I'm talking about real haunted places when looking at the history about why these places are haunted, by who, by what. And then I'm talking about the fact that ghost stories are so important at a time when we're seeing an administration that wants to erase and whitewash history, why we need to listen to our ghosts more than ever. And
Mm.
so it's a history book, but it's told in ghost stories. And I have to say, my husband's reading it right now. And then I'm going to turn it into my editor in the next couple of weeks, and then they'll get back to me with their edits. But it's coming out next year, and it's called Dead Reckoning, a history of ghost stories. I can't remember the subtitle. I don't think we've quite ironed it out yet, but it's a history of ghost stories and hauntings or something like that. And so I have had so much fun. So yeah, I'm leaving the scary extremists behind and going to ghosts.
There you go.
Yes, we're going mystical. We're going.
So
Well,
yeah,
it's
it's
but it's our
super fun.
ancestors. It's
Yes,
learning
and
from our
ancestors.
ancestors. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
learning
I,
from our
and
ancestors.
I talk about that too. And I
Mm.
talk about the idea of generational healing rather than
Ooh,
generational.
epigenetics.
Yes.
Yes.
So there's a lot in there that's been, cathartic at a time when we're going through what we're going through.
Yeah. Oh my Lord. I can't wait. I kind of wait. Would you agree to come back on and talk about it when it comes out?
Oh yeah, I would
Oh,
love that.
excellent. Would you join us, Tasha?
Oh, of course.
That would be awesome. All right. Well, ladies, any last things that you would like to share with our listeners before we sign off? Where I place to find Tasha. I've already said that. Oh, wait a second. I said I wanted to talk about your song, Tasha.
No. Oh no.
Yes. Oh no, I went and found it. Slim Vampire. Oh, I love that. What's his real name?
It's Seth Curlin. I believe he wrote something like 98 episodes of Friends. So
Oh,
if you don't like that, certain people didn't get together in enough time. It took too long. He's the man to.
Exactly.
He drug that out.
When the house, she co-wrote this song, When the House Lights Click Back On. And you can find that song. It's not on your website, which I was
No,
surprised.
it's on Spotify, and I don't have, I didn't sign up for the CD thing or whatever, the music songwriting thing in time. So I don't even think my name's officially on it, but he has it on his
IG.
Yeah, and I think he has a TikTok, I think too. He goes by Slim Vampire. And
Slim Vampire.
Sometimes I repost it now and then, but I really don't know how to use Instagram. I'm old. I got kicked off of Twitter.
I saw that too. I was like, well, that's like a bonus to get kicked
That's
off
a badge
Twitter.
of honor.
Yes, full on.
Permanently
like,
banned. I just
Bye-bye.
reposting our documentary. The trailers. Yeah.
Oh my. Wow.
And I hope that that's available at some point. I really,
it kind of is. It's really tricky to watch. The only way I've found to do it, my kids haven't even seen it. I mean, maybe Dakota's watched.
This is King of the Apocalypse.
You have to go to the NBC site.
Okay.
And somewhere on that site it says join. And it actually is free to join with an email. It's pretty simple. It's just name an email, verify the email, and it's somewhere on there. It says, you have 3 credits. And then you can watch King of the Apocalypse.
Oh, good.
With one of the 3 credits.
I really, really have been dying to see it.
Yeah, nobody can watch it. I don't know a single person who's seen it because it's too hard to watch. It's just,
So how do you get the credits?
You just get that for signing. I think it just says sign up or become a member of NBC. You do it from a laptop or whatever, and it actually is
gives you the credits.
Yeah, it'll try to say, for this much money. No, how about for free? Okay, verify the email, and then you'll get these 3 free credits.
Oh, got it.
And you can watch 3 of their shows. Yeah, it's been nobody's seen it.
Well, folks, that'll be in the show notes. And you can watch this, and I'm going to run, not walk to watch it. So Betsy Gaines Quammen.com, that will also be in the show notes. You can find Betsy's book on her website. You can call both of her books and her, I'm sure, upcoming book on her website. But you can also call your local bookstore and get it there. If you can't get it either of those ways, then okay, go to Amazon. You can do it.
Or you can go to the library. I do have one.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Cute story. I just got a picture from Heather Cox Richardson the other day of her reading American Zion in the Berkeley Library. So I was so excited. So I'd love you to buy one at your local bookstore, but you can also get it at the library. Both of them, fabulous. I think. Or ask the library to order it.
Yeah. No, totally.
The library to order that.
Totally. Well, I have a signed copy, everyone. So there. But it's a great plug for libraries too, particularly in today's world.
Yeah. Yes.
Hello.
Libraries.
Well, they're still standing. Well, we still have them.
Oh, my Lord. Well, ladies, I am ever so grateful that you have spent time with me on the Edge of Everyday podcast. Thank you both so much for coming on.
Thank you, Sandra. It's been really great and so wonderful to talk to my friend Tasha.
Oh,
yes. Yay!
You guys made me laugh and cry all in an hour.
Oh, good. Good, good, good. Well, and to my listeners, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Remember, you are always at the edge of the miraculous. Until we speak again, take good care.